Yeah, so, well, first of all, thank you everyone for joining Maya Henry and myself for a salon on her debut novel, Looking Forward, which is about fame, girlhood, heartache, and ultimately, and most importantly, I think it's about healing. And as we get started, I just want to say how much I admire your courage for publishing this. I know I already said this before I let everyone in, but I'm going to say it again. Looking Forward is very much inspired by your own life, and from one writer to another. I know that writing is such a personal thing. It's a very personal way of releasing pain, finding joy, seeking freedom. And hitting publish is always the hardest step because I think the moment you publish something, that's the moment where people can start judging you and criticizing you. So it's definitely not easy. You're such an incredible writer. Writing isn't just putting one word after another. It's about weaving a story, giving the reader something to feel, something to imagine, envision, something to take away after they put the book down. I definitely took away a lot from your story. I remember like I was like reading your book, coming out of the shower, just sitting in my bathrobe and like tears streaming down my face. This is chapter
Oh my
33,
gosh.
by the way. Like end of 32, 33, somewhere there. Um, so I want to say what a powerful thing it is to share your healing journey and the trauma part of that journey as well, I guess, with all the young women who might feel they feel more heard and more understood when they read this book. Not everyone has dated a pop star, but I'm sure that many of us have dated an Oliver and had this experience, this mythological fairy tale arc of going into a relationship thinking it's one thing and then having been chewed up and spit back out and then realizing all these things and growing up ultimately.
Mhm.
And now I'm just talking on and on forever. So before we get into the discussion, Maya, is there anything you'd like to add?
Um, I know I think you pretty much hit like all the points of why, looking forward came to be and stuff. I think writing this story was really therapeutic for me, especially when things of that caliber happen. I feel like being able to put those emotions into words to then create a story for not only women, but anyone to read and hopefully encourage them and maybe their voices hopefully feel heard as well. I feel like that was mainly why I wanted to write this story and release it. And you are right about how hitting the publish button is the hardest part. Because I remember like 2 weeks before I announced the book, my mom was visiting me in New York and I remember like I started crying and I was just like, I don't think I'm gonna do this. Like I really don't want to do this anymore. I don't think it's a good idea. You're just scared of people judging you. But once it was out there, I feel like now I feel more brave and um I feel like now it's easier to be able to speak up once it's just out there. So yeah.
What is this moment of um no longer hiding? What does this moment feel like?
I feel like it's almost like a breath of fresh air because when you're hiding, not hiding, but suppressing so many things and also just having that fear of what's going to happen if I do release something or if you speak up about a certain topic, you always have a fear of being judged, or especially as a woman, a fear of not being believed. And I
Mm.
feel like that's the hardest part of that whole thing. And that's ultimately what was holding me back. But when my mom gave me that pep talk, she was like, you can either let someone run all over you and keep disrespecting you, or you can use your own voice to inspire other women. And so that's kind of what pushed me.
Mm. So I guess that was like the revelatory moment where you realized I got to put this out in the world. Did
Hmm.
you feel like it didn't matter what people say about me? Because I snooped around your Instagram. I went back to the post where you were first announcing your book, and the comments were like they were terrible. Like
Hmm.
people said pretty terrible things. I know that your story is it's based on your real life, and with a simple Google search, people can kind of put two and two together to see who that Oliver was and who were the real characters involved in your story. Um, what did you feel like an instant pang of regret when you started seeing those comments, or how did you overcome that?
At first, when I saw the comments, I mean, there's always going to be people that are going to say stuff regardless. And I feel like people were a bit confused at the announcement because there's the cover and the content warnings. And it was kind of like, well, why would you put these content warnings? You're trying to paint someone to be a certain way or whatever. But obviously once you read the book, you understand why that's there. But I feel like when you see those comments, it can be a little bit disheartening at first, but I feel like once you just pull the trigger and after a few days, you're just like, okay, whatever. They're just gonna say, especially if they're a fan of someone, they're always gonna stick on their side. And so I feel like it's just something you just eventually get over, and you just have to be strong about these kinds of things.
That is very empowering. I've never wished to become famous. I don't think I ever want to be famous because I don't think I can handle that, to be honest. Um, but I had a question earlier in my head about the writing process. Were you like, was this book a did you journal every day and then compile it into a book? Or did you decide one day that I'm going to tell the story in retrospect and then you wrote everything at once?
So I started journaling during lockdown. Just in my computer, I would write down just thoughts, feelings, things that were happening. And then I got the idea actually. So my fiance at the time said, why don't you write a sort of fan fiction type book? And so that's kind of where the idea came from. And so it was also like a compilation of those journal entries. And then also I just started writing the story. And I feel like I didn't know how it was going to end at the time. And so I would start writing and then put it down, pick it back up. But I feel like after I also, something that really helped me was I made this timeline of events that had happened in the relationship. And I had the locations, the dates, pictures, everything. And I just had it all in a timeline laid out. And so that was kind of like the bones of the book. And then from there, I just had to pick out what I wanted to be in the story and what that would also help flow. Because I could put everything in a book, but it's
Mhm.
not going to flow for the reader, or it's going to be too long, or, whatever. So I kind of just had to pick and choose what scenes I was going to include and what was going to be too violent or not. So there's also stuff I had to leave out. So that was kind of ultimately like how that came about.
And how did you, in the process of figuring out when you turn this into fiction, what do I keep to myself? What do I make private? I feel like there's also an artistic element to storytelling when you fictionalize your own life. What like how did you approach that? How did you add that element of drama? Not that your real story wasn't dramatic enough, but
Mhm.
how did you make a readable fiction out of it?
I feel like the whole reason why I wanted to make it fiction was because I also, a lot of characters in the book, well, not a lot of them, a few, um, of like the side characters were a, a few people from your life combined into one. And also the timelines were a bit switched around. Stuff like that is why I wanted to make it fiction. And also just some minor little details of like locations and stuff that I had switched around is ultimately why it's a fiction novel. And I also wanted it to read like a novel and not like a memoir, which could be, I don't want to say all are boring, but I feel like the style is a little bit, can be a bit mundane. So yeah, that's why I kind of did it like
Mm.
that.
That's very interesting. And especially the part where you said that you had to essentially go through all your memories and lay out like what are the key moments in this relationship in the past few years and how do I turn that into a story. I imagine that this process was some combination of therapeutic and painful. So did you find um Did you find this authoring process therapeutic at all? Or like, how did it help your healing and recovery?
I feel like writing the story did feel therapeutic. I some of the scenes which you read, like the abortion scene, the axe scene, um, having to like write it and rewrite it and stuff, for me was in the moment difficult, having to like rewrite and reread and go
Hmm.
back into the mindset of what was going on in those moments and how I was feeling, and then putting that to paper and describing my emotions and stuff and how I was feeling was difficult at the time because you never want to go back to that dark headspace. But
Yeah.
um, I feel like also in a way writing that later and reciting all of that can be therapeutic because you're like, okay, this happened, and you don't ever want to go back to being in that headspace. And it kind of helps you also move forward in life and be like, okay, I never want that again.
Hmm. Hmm. I can definitely relate to that. I feel like whenever I have to write, especially something more personal, I have to like tap into that like sad girl Lana
Hmm.
Del Rey. Like I got to write some lyrics, and you,
Yeah.
you do have to. I'm not saying that like you have to court your own sadness in order to write, but you do have to tap into the source of pain to really get the emotions and really speak to whoever wants to know your story and read your book. Um,
Hmm.
Elo, I see your hand. Okay, so how about this? With questions and answers, I'm gonna save 25 minutes at the end of the call for audience Q&A. Um, sounds good. For now, feel free to leave them in the chat. I'll get to that later. Thank you. And if you see someone who's already asked your question, just emoji react to that and I'll get to it. Great. Um, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so the thing you just said reminded me of this quote from Eckhart Tolle, who said that something like life will give you the exact experience that you need. And how do you know you need it? Because that's what you get. It's almost like what you put into the world comes back at you, and that everything you experience is it's your own consciousness putting something out there to evolve itself. And I think writing
Hmm.
is such a special, I'm not sure if this is true for all forms of art, but writing especially, when you have to think about something again and try to articulate it, you definitely shape your own consciousness of that experience.
Yeah, for sure.
And I guess that now that you have this experience in writing in a book, does it do you see your own history from a higher view? Like, do you feel like you have officially graduated from that period and you're not, you're kind of seeing a you can visibly tell I am now a more mature version of myself versus the Maya that was 3, 4 years ago.
No, yeah, definitely. I feel like I'm a totally different person. I feel like those experiences, I mean, from being 18 to now 23, um, but learning those lessons in such a short amount of time in a certain relationship, I feel like although they were terrible and horrible, in a way, I wouldn't say I'm grateful for the things that have happened, but I would rather learn everything early and go through those things than down later in life. Hopefully that doesn't ever happen again, but I feel like it helped me mature so quick, like living on my own in a foreign country and dealing with all of that.
Mhm.
So in a way, I am glad that those things happened early on, and really, I feel like they really shaped me into growing as a woman.
Mm. For sure. I think leaving the nest is a really big theme in the story. Many of the
Mhm.
toughest moments, like for example, when you have to go to the hospital, when you were hemorrhaging in the story, you had to go alone and you deal with all these situations by yourself. Definitely there's a sense of you're kind of forced to be self-sufficient and you're forced to see just how independent you can be when you have no other choice. What did you personally, what did you learn about yourself or your strength in moments like that?
I feel like in moments like that, it can be obviously scary to be alone and having to go through those situations alone and not by choice, obviously. But I feel like now I am very self-sufficient. I can just go anywhere and do anything on my own. I feel like I don't like to ask people for help So I feel like that's been a great gift and something that I really kind of admire about myself now.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Mallory Hunt at the beginning of the story versus towards the end. I think the biggest change I see in her is that she's taking her power back. Like she
Mhm.
would say things, she would say yes to things that she knows she shouldn't say yes to. And that is so common. Like that is the reason why people stay in relationships longer than they should be in, or they stay in a I don't know, like a company that they know they're not, it's a dead end and they just keep going. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
to your younger self or someone who is younger than you, what what advice, that's so cheesy, but like what would you say to them around this idea of like protecting your power, protecting your energy?
I think that saying no is okay. And I feel like when you're younger, and I mean, obviously I'm at fault for this. You always say yes to things that you should be saying no to, or if you feel uncomfortable, or if you have a certain intuition about a certain thing, always follow your gut and intuition, because that's something I do now. But when I was younger, I was a people pleaser, and it's like, let me say yes because you don't want to upset them or make them angry or have them lash out at you. But I feel like now I'm very good at, if I know something's not serving me, I'm just going to say no and move on. And you don't have to feel guilty about it. Because I feel like also guilt is something you feel a lot when you're telling people no. But I feel like in a way, in certain situations, you have to just look out for yourself and protect your own peace and just move on.
Why do you think we feel guilty as if like we owe people something?
I think, I don't know if it's an age thing, but I felt that a lot when I was younger. But I feel like it's easy to say, tell someone, give them that advice, but ultimately you have to go through certain things to even be able to realize that, because if I hadn't gone through what I'd gone through, I would never be able to uh, be confident enough to say no or follow my own intuition. So I feel like it's just a learning process, and as you grow older, you it becomes easier.
Does it become easier? Like how do you find that intuition within yourself?
I don't know. I always, when I have a gut feeling about something or I feel like something's not right, I feel like I kind of just move on from it, or, you know, I won't sit there and dwell or feel guilty about it. So I don't know. I feel like it just depends on obviously the situation and stuff, but yeah.
Hmm. I've thought a lot about this before, and just looking at the people on this call, there's like an obvious gender split. But I feel like when it comes to intuition, I feel like female intuition is so different from male intuition. And there's something very special. I mean, I can't speak for the other side, but I just feel like there's something very unique about female intuition. So I want to like quickly follow up before I forget. Um, in a relationship, there's always this stage where, as a woman, I feel like we are happy to submit ourselves to a man we deeply respect and want to help him succeed in his career. And we see Mallory do that for Oliver many times. Um, and of course, this becomes one of his excuses towards the end. But this is also the stage in a relationship where in an unmarried relationship, I should specify, where I think a woman easily loses herself because she exerts so much and she thinks that like this guy's going to propose to me, like we're going to get married, so why not give him my 100% and kind of live my life for him, be his therapist, be his whatever.
Mhm.
How can a young girl uh or just, like a young woman who is entering her early relationship and someone who, ultimately wants to get married, what is something that you would say to her?
I would say don't give up your life or your work or your career or anything for a man. And I know that sounds, maybe it sounds bad to some people, but I think ultimately you never know if something's going to last. And I don't mean that to sound negative, but if there's one thing you can always have as a woman, it's going to be like your family, your career, and you always have to make yourself a priority, because you can't really ever rely on anyone but yourself. And yeah, so
Yeah, it always comes back to that, doesn't it?
yeah. I know that might sound a bit negative, but I mean, you can only rely on yourself in this world and yeah.
No, not at all. I don't think that's negative. I also don't think that is um exclusively for women. I think it's also for men. It's just
Yeah.
that I think in the recent years with like the changes in like the cultural narrative around feminism and girl power, it's a lot harder to communicate that for women. But I think that's always
Mhm.
been true.
No, for sure.
And back to the topic of fame, um just very generally, I don't even know how you're going to take which direction you're going to take this in, but what did you learn about the world or just human nature in general in your rise to fame? Like what does fame do to people? What does it expose about people?
Um, I don't really consider myself famous, but like being in a relationship with someone who was, you really kind of see what how it kind of can change people or what that world is like. And I feel like having to deal with someone that has a fan base and stuff, you kind of see what the world or how people can really be cruel or how they can really think they know something about someone or someone's life and they really don't.
Mhm.
Um, but also living with someone who is at that level, you really see what goes on behind closed doors and what you read online from what goes on is, is literally like 1% of the things that happen and the stuff that like gets covered up or things like that. It's just it honestly is so crazy to me because now when I see stuff online, I'm like, is this even real? Is this article fake? What's
Mhm.
really going on? So I feel like it really like kind of changed my perception of even like looking at things online now.
Mhm. And it must be really absurd being in love with this guy and seeing, a more realistic side of him versus a million girls who love him, but they're fans of him. Like they love him in the way that they are a fan of him. And
Mhm.
like the thing is they're not even in love with him. They're in love with the image of him that publicity has created for him and like the magazines have created for him. What did it feel like being that one woman on the inside versus a million girls who are just like you, but just have a different life and they only see this glamorous part of this celebrity.
I felt like it felt pretty normal. I would say besides obviously the relationship being so public, at home, like just day to day, lived a pretty like obviously the things that happened weren't normal, but just kind of you almost forget when you're just like living with someone what they do or like, you know, that they're can be, they have fans and stuff. So I feel like when we'd be out and like someone would ask for a picture with him, it'd be like, oh wait, like I forgot. You know what I mean? Oh, sorry, this last drink on me. But it's like you almost forget like in the moment. So it's like snapping back into like that is kind of bizarre.
But does it feel like, is there a part of you that says, oh, I understand it's part of his job? Or does it feel like a strange jealousy, competitiveness?
Oh no, I totally understand it's part of someone's job and that's, their career and they've worked so hard for that that it's not bothersome at all. It's just what comes with it.
Mm-hmm. I see. Mm. And when when you become someone you're not familiar with, for example, when you started modeling and you kind of see yourself on the other side of the camera and you're like, whoa, who is she? Like, that's not who I usually am. Um, I feel like it changes people's self-image or their confidence. Like I see this happen with celebrities in our culture. Some people grow really confident. Like I think Billie Eilish is like a good example of that, and then like they become more comfortable being their true self or being dressing a certain way or like being however weird they want. But then there are also people who have their insecurities magnified by fame. And usually those people don't have really their life goes downhill. Like I think fame ruins them in a way. um for you, I'm curious about that time in your life where you rose to, I know you don't feel famous, but I'm going to use this word anyway, like when you rose to fame through modeling, what did you feel about your insecurity and confidence? How did that fluctuate inside you?
I feel like the worst part of that is you become more hard on yourself and insecure because of seeing yourself in pictures, or if you see a picture of yourself online and you look terrible, it can kind of beat you down in a way, um,
Mm.
and make you also, people in the industry and like telling you like how you should look or what your body should look like can be very discouraging, especially when I mean, I started modeling when I was around like 16. So that can be difficult, especially at such a young age. So I feel like in that time from like 16 to like 19 or 20, I did become very insecure. But I think it's something that you have to just work on, and yeah, hopefully,
Mm.
I mean, it's difficult. It's easier said than done. But yeah, it's definitely, it can build a lot of insecurity. And I see that also a lot with like people that are in the spotlight and stuff. As you said, it's like you either become more comfortable with yourself or you become more insecure. And I've seen where you would think that the most secure people on like Instagram and TikTok, you're like, oh my God, they seem like they have the perfect life. They seem like they're so secure. They're actually the most insecure, which is actually sad, but that's kind of why also I don't think comparing yourself to people online is healthy, because you just never know.
And the part of the story that really spoke to me was Mallory's eating disorder because
Mhm.
I've been there, done that. So I think that part of the story really spoke to the younger self in me. And
Mhm.
I can't help but feel like it had to do with control. Like I think eating disorders ultimately it's like a form of control. Like the sick pleasure of the self-torment that comes with an eating disorder has to do with you feel like your power is elsewhere and you want to take that power back. Do you think that do you think that the reason why eating disorder is so prevalent in the celebrity industry or in things like modeling, is that a reason why? Aside from the fact that yes, you have to stay thin, you have to look a certain way.
Um, I do think yeah, it is really prevalent in the modeling industry because of all the pressure. And I do agree that having an eating disorder does feel like a sense of having control over something, because I feel like I was bulimic for a number of years, and that I included that in the story. Um, that's something that Mallory had in the book as well. And it felt like I could control, like I could eat whatever I want, but I won't gain weight. So it just, but I do think that came from obviously like insecurities and modeling and stuff. It's like they want you to be a certain size, and at a certain point, it's like I can't get any smaller, and I don't want to starve myself. So yeah, I feel like lots of people in the industry unfortunately do. I feel like a lot of young women now as well struggle with eating disorders, and I feel like it's also due to social media.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I'm interested in hearing about now that we're on the topic of modeling. Um, I've always wondered in such uh like a beauty focused, heavily female industry, what is um what is jealousy? What is that dynamic like among women? Because I know it's a negative thing to talk about. I'm not saying like all women are jealous all the time, but I think it's definitely like that stereotype exists for a reason. I think that like I don't know, I just feel like psychologically jealousy is manifested very differently in an all female group versus like among men. Um, how did you like did anything ever surprise you or that mixed with fame? I can only imagine the trouble that comes out of that. How did you navigate those feelings of people who wanted to sabotage you or they were jealous of you?
I feel like when I was modeling and back in the day, that I wasn't really like, I was around women and stuff at these shows, but I was very a to myself person, and I never found myself interacting with a lot of people. And like I had my mom come everywhere with me since I
Mm.
was 16. Like she goes everywhere with me still. So she was kind of my friend that would just be there with me. So I never really got to experience people being jealous or any interact like negative interactions with women. I don't think I really honestly had any negative interactions with women in that period. I feel like the only negative interactions were people online. It was never anyone that I came across face to face or that I knew. Because it's always like me and my family and then my circle of friends, which I is pretty tight. So I feel like I never really got to experience any of that negative side.
That's great. I know that like even just hearing from about Mallory's life that you have a very, very close-knit family, and that's
Mhm.
wonderful. That's really great.
Yes, we're very close. We all still live together, like down the street from each other. So
Oh, so when you go to New York, you're living on your own?
yes. Yeah, I was living on my own in New York. I moved back now, but my mom lives here with my grandma, and my uncle lives in the same neighborhood. My other one lives down the street. So we're all, and my brother, so we're all like 10 minutes from each other.
I'm so jealous. That sounds
It's a lot of
like
drama and chaos, but it's fun.
um there's a okay, so there's I saved this quote, these few quotes from the book. I wanted to contrast these two quotes because one is near the beginning of the story and then one is towards the end. And there's like a total 180 change in character development, really. So the first one goes, I think Mallory was talking about her ex-boyfriend, like before she got into fame. I think it was Marco. And she says, the way he said these things, it sounded romantic and destined. He was my first everything, and I didn't know any better. This was love, I told myself. I stopped being an I and become a we. If two people were lucky enough to find each other in this great big world, to find the one, you put everything you have into that relationship. And then towards the end, when everything falls apart, she says, can I ever love again, trust again? I'm worried I am too jaded and traumatized. My heart feels as cold as a rock and I am numb to emotions. I hate Oliver for this, but it doesn't have to happen now or even years from now. I've got my whole life. On the plane to New York, I realized that the Oliver situation wasn't about me. Maybe Oliver really did love me, just not the way I deserved to be loved. And I had so many questions pop into my head from this realization. It almost feels like you're untangling this perpetual struggle of understanding where romance fits into a relationship. So, like, as of now, what is your take on how does a girl discover what it is that she deserves? Like, how do you know that, oh, this is the way I deserve to be loved versus not?
Ugh, I feel like I just had to learn through experience and like being in those relationships that when you go through so much or you put up with so much from someone, I feel like you just have to learn those lessons. And then you ultimately, there comes a point where you're like, I don't deserve this. I deserve better. And then now, like for me now, I feel like I know my worth and I know what I deserve, and I'm not going to settle for less and I'm not going to waste my time. So I feel like it's all just a learning process. And as you grow, you kind of just figure that out.
Mm. I hear that slogan a lot, like, don't settle. Like we say that a lot, but I wonder if there is more to that. Instead of on top of telling people to not settle, because that's not the same question as saying, is this person the one? Like not
Mhm.
settling for someone is one thing, but also determining are they the one is another. How do you, what about the second half?
I feel like also not settling, not, I feel like also people sometimes will take that quote a little too literally where they're like, I won't settle for that. When I do understand when we meet people and there's something you might not like about someone or a certain thing that I feel like you also should be able to compromise with someone or, nobody's perfect. There's no perfect man or woman out there. So we should have to like compromise and stuff. But I feel like the difference between not or yeah, settling in the one. Ugh, I don't know, I haven't figured that out yet. I'm like, I feel like if you meet the one, you should like, I feel like you would just know, right? I don't know.
Well, I don't know either. That's why I threw that question out in the open. Um, but one of my earliest viral tweets was like I was going on about just thinking and talking about relationships, and I remember I did this poll on Twitter, and I asked people like, what do you think is the most important thing in a relationship? Chemistry, similarity, or compatibility? And I had this whole like, I think like compatibility is the most important at the end of the day, but I also had a very hard time defining compatibility. I wonder if you have anything to add to this pet theory of mine.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree because I feel like if you're not compatible with someone, it's not going to work in the long run. I feel like you can have like different interests and stuff, but ultimately, if your personalities aren't compatible, if your idea of, you know, if I'm close to my family and you're not close to my family and you can't understand that, that's like a compatibility issue. Um, so I feel like compatibility is the main thing in a relationship because ultimately it's just going to fall apart and you're not going to get along. But I feel like chemistry you can have with someone, but I feel like that can go away so quick or not go away quickly, but when the fog lifts, it's like, oh shoot, we're not as compatible as we thought because maybe it was overshadowed by like chemistry or like sexual chemistry. So I feel like compatibility definitely is the most important and obviously chemistry. So it's like you can have both.
It sounds like I feel like chemistry is important for that spark.
Hmm.
Like you gotta have that
Something.
like you can't like start a fire with like just wood. Like you gotta spark it. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's a difficult because when I did the poll, my results were actually almost like 30-30-30 split. Like people were very
Oh,
divided.
wow.
Yeah, which is I just think there's so much to talk about there. I know I
Yeah.
said I'm gonna get to Q&A later, but there's one question I think it's relevant. Is there really a one? Aren't there so many ones?
I actually, I kind of, so I was just talking about this with my mom. She's divorced, but she was kind of saying like, because back in the day, I feel like people would get married and then they would just stay with each other forever. But now looking back, I'm like, did they really get along the whole time? And I've heard people that have been in marriages a few times or with like multiple people, and at the end of their life, they're like, I at that moment, I felt so much love for that person, or like they were the one for me in that moment, or they helped me in that specific moment in my life. So I feel like there could be multiple people or multiple ones that it's
Mm.
not just a fairy tale and we just meet one person and spend the rest of our lives with them. Because also, I feel like the person you are at, say, if you meet someone at 20 and get married and you evolve and grow, when you're 40, you're a totally different person and they might be a different person too. And you might not serve each other anymore, and that's fine. And you can still get along, but maybe it's time to move on and you maybe meet someone else, but it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, I like my hottest take right now, one that I have not published anywhere. So guys, if you see it on my Twitter or Substack, don't be surprised. But like one of my hottest takes right now is I think Bezos does like I think he's glowing. Like that man is such a good match with Lauren. I know people love to hate her because according to the fairy tale version of romance, people should stay together. You can't just you can't just dump Mackenzie because of whatever reason, and she helped you build your business. But I think that's not the full story. Like you don't know the Bezos family personally. um
Yeah.
I think that like seeing the photos of them, I think Lauren and Jeff Bezos are such a great match. They've really grown together, and Jeff and Mackenzie have grown apart. Like she is obviously not as adventurous. She doesn't like, you know, trying these new things, and Lauren is. um
Yeah. I feel like
yeah,
also when you hit a certain age in your life, you like this happened for my mom. It's like when she's like 47 now, but when her and my dad split up, I feel like she was a different person and she's now glowing and she looks so much younger. And now she's like, I just want to travel and have fun and be with my kids. And she was like, I'm at the age where I just don't care anymore and I just want to live my life for me. So that was also kind of inspiring because I'm like, I feel like you shouldn't stay in relationships that make you unhappy or stay for the sake of whatever. So yeah.
That's definitely something I learned myself, but we tend to stay in things because we think it's comfortable, but what's
Hmm.
comfortable isn't peaceful. Like comfort and peace are actually two different, they're actually two different things. I think that was a hard personal lesson that I learned in my life, but I definitely see it reflected in Mallory's situation.
No, yeah, for sure. That was also in that story. It was like, I feel like Mallory was also so comfortable, and not that comfort equals like safety or happiness, but it's like once you're in something, it's so hard to get out and leave, especially when you've moved your entire life to a new country. It's hard to be like, okay, let me pack up everything and leave. And, it's just can get really complicated. So I do agree that comfort doesn't equal peace.
I'm just gonna get into the Q&A because there's a lot of these and I don't want to lose the thread. Do you think that the idea of the one do you think that actually gets us into more trouble?
Um, I feel like it depends on the person. I do think that sometimes we can, especially as women, you always are searching for the one, and it's like an endless search. But I feel like, especially in this day and age with social media and dating apps, and I feel like the men are so much different now. I feel like finding the one is, I don't want to say it's going to be difficult, but I feel like times have changed that I feel like maybe, oh, I don't want this to sound bad, but I feel like there can be multiple ones in your life and people that you love, and I don't think you need to stay with the same person for the rest of your life, especially if it doesn't serve you, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's your life and you only have one life and you need to live it for yourself. So it's kind of like you need to do what makes you happy.
How do you know that someone is compatible? Is it based on so that I know that people care about religious values, political views, things like that. But outside of these obvious ones, what are small things that are a sign of compatibility?
I feel like sense of humor is a big one,
Oof, yeah.
especially for me, because if someone doesn't get a certain joke, or I mean, my family, like their sense of humor is very, it's out there. It's pretty sick. So if someone just can't get with our vibe, it's just hard for them to be around. Or if I feel like sense of humor is a big one, because if someone gets offended by something that you don't, or like vice versa, I feel like that can be a big problem sometimes.
Yeah, humor and like Riz, it's such
Yeah.
a like it's like a vibe check almost.
Hmm.
It's like, what do you sense from this? What is like the energy you sense from this person? So, and it's also like a huge sign of the way this person thinks. I think humor is tied to intellect. Like it just how do you think? How do you conceptualize the world? That
Yeah.
definitely with humor.
I was just talking about that with a friend, and we were like, I feel like humor does tie into um intellect. Like I totally agree. Because I feel like also you have to be like quick on your feet and stuff if you're like joking around with someone. And I feel like I think it was a quote online somewhere that said something like that.
Mm. Have you are you familiar with like the or anyone like on the call, like the what is it called? Like the seduction, like types of seduction by Robert Greene?
Oh, The Art of Seduction?
Yeah, like you know how he
Yeah,
talks
I read that book.
like the archetypes of people who are like how people charm other people.
Yeah, there's like different types of people, and it teaches you what you should do. Kind of you identify the person, and then it's kind of like what you do
Mhm.
to not I guess seduce them, but
To
for
charm
their,
them, to talk to
yeah,
them.
to charm them, like for their type of personality, or like how they are.
Yeah, I almost, Oliver and I feel like a lot of celebrities, they really are the star. Like that's the seduction type I get. They are the star. And I don't know, there's so many pros and cons. Like I don't want to call them manipulative because it is kind of that's just how their personality works. Like people who just, for example, Marilyn Monroe is a star that Robert Greene talks about in his book. Like people who
Mhm.
are really good at putting up a facade and perform,
Yeah.
not because they're fake or they want to fool people, but that's just like how their personality works.
Yeah, also I do agree with that. And also another thing that people I feel like don't take into account with celebrities or famous people is especially if they're child stars, they've been media trained since they were, 13, 14, 15, 16. They know how to work a camera, they know how to work rooms, they know how to work people. And not that it's a bad thing, it's their job, but they're so highly skilled at doing that. And I feel like seeing someone in that element, you can kind of learn a lot from them. Whether it's like communication tactics or I feel like they're just so good at talking to anyone or just in any, like, uncomfortable situation or pretending or whatever. So I do agree that they're very skilled at that.
Did you go through any training like that when you started gaining more eyes?
No, because I mean, I didn't really do, like, interviews and stuff. So I was like, I don't
Mhm.
need, media training or I understand if you're, like, on press tours and stuff, but I'm not.
Mm. That's good. It's I think it's a good balance of wanting to get your name out there because you're an author and for other reasons, but also keeping that privacy and living your own life.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just going through the comments. Oh, I see that. I think Eloy left the chat. Um I'm gonna ask this question anyway. So I think this is what he put his hand up for earlier. He said that does writing allow you to close the chapter, bad pun, sorry, and move on? Back when we were talking about writing being therapeutic.
Oh, yes. I feel like it does allow you that's kind of why I wanted to write this book is because I put a lot of things in there and it was therapeutic and hard at the same time, but it kind of is like closing the book and moving on with
And
your
looking
life
forward.
and from those experiences. And it's kind of you're closing the book and giving it to the world, and hopefully someone out there can read it. And if they've been through a similar situation, hopefully feel seen or heard or like they're not alone. Because I feel like in those times of hardship, you're always thinking, why me? Why, does this happen to anyone else? And I feel like once you hear other people's stories, you feel a little less alone.
Hmm. Yeah, certainly. I mean, I started writing online just like out of curiosity and boredom. Like it was totally just for fun. I started off anonymous. And then I made a friend on Twitter and she was like, you should totally like add your name and just be a person. So I did that. I don't regret it. Yeah, so and the best part of writing is when I get feedback when people say, "Oh, I really, this really spoke to me. I'm so glad you put this on the internet." And it's always the best part. As a writer, that is the best thing to receive um from strangers on the internet anywhere, really.
Yeah, I got a lot of comments from a lot of women on Instagram that have read the book or parts of the book, and a lot of them were either I had so many girls reach out to me about not only the abuse resonating with them, or a family member, but also the abortion scene. I had a lot of women reach out, and it was you actually don't realize how many women go through the same thing. So it was also really eye-opening, but I'm also happy that they felt heard and seen and that they could resonate with something.
Yeah, and this is another one from the chat. Did you feel like that the experience has diminished your trust in people? And did writing the story help with that?
Yeah, I definitely do think that it diminished my trust in people. I mean, I was never really a super trustworthy person to begin with, but now I
Yeah,
really
tell
don't
me about
trust
it.
I really don't trust anyone or anything anyone says, and I always feel like everyone's just lying anyways, so I'm very cautious about, what people say to me, or I'm always thinking about, whatever. So,
Mhm.
yeah, it definitely did diminish my trust in people.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, but like not surprising at all.
Yeah. I mean,
Same.
honestly, I'd rather not be so trustworthy at first than to be overly trusting because I feel like that cannot be good as well. So I'd rather be on the other side of it and just
Yeah,
let people's
you can always
actions
add.
speak. Yeah.
Um, and back to social media. Has spending time writing changed your relationship with social media and fame?
Um, I f a little bit. I feel like I used to be I feel like when you see the other side of how people are online and social media, you always believe everything that's online or that's posted, but now and you always compare yourself to people online or especially relationships online is a big one. It's like people I always see people saying, "Oh, I wish I could, I wish I had a relationship like them, X, Y, and Z, whatever." But you really don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And I feel like from my experience of um during the time in my relationship when I was posting stuff, it's like you would never think that what was going on behind closed doors was really happening. So I feel like it has changed in a way of like I don't think people not that it's you're lying or not being truthful on social media, but you obviously not everything's shown. So I feel like it's important to kind of just take it with a grain of salt and not admire everything online or believe in a way.
I also think that it's important to have a persona online. Like you can't be 100% truthful. It's also like for a safety and privacy reason. Like you shouldn't be telling everything. No one's forcing you to tell the truth on
Yeah,
everything.
for
You
sure.
don't have to lie, but you don't have to tell everything either.
Yeah. Yeah, there's stuff you obviously like don't want to tell people.
Yeah, but I think social media is a really strange phenomenon because the like these celebrities and these like huge influencers, they're giving off the impression that they're like your close friends. Because that's what gets people going. Like that is the point of lifestyle influencing. But at the end of the day,
Mhm.
they're not your friends. And they're not like, for example, when Kylie Jenner thanks us for like 1 million followers, people are gonna pat themselves on the back and be like, oh, she's thanking me. But like she doesn't know who you are and she doesn't know that you exist, most of the people
Yeah.
that are seeing that post. And every time I go through the comments of posts like that, I'm just like, why are you guys like replying? She's not gonna read these and she's not gonna know who you are anyway.
Yeah.
It
Like she's
feels
not
so like
scrolling through
that's
this.
like that is the strangest part of social media for me, that people act like they're friends and the audience know that they're not friends, but both sides are willing to participate in this weird, like, pseudo friendship.
Yeah, or they'll be like, "Oh, they would never say this or they would never do that." And I'm like, "But how would you know? Because you don't know them and you've never met them." So, I think I mean, yeah, that part is like it's really bizarre to me because I feel like some people truly do think that I mean, I had this experience in my relationship. It's people saying like, "He would never do that. He would never say that." But I'm like, "Who lives with him?" So it's like, how would you know and not me?
Mm,
Or it's
mhm.
just bizarre. Yeah.
Does it, I feel like I've been in a similar situation where I know more about someone than the public or the rest of our friends do. And it
Mhm.
really frustrates me because I feel like I'm the one going crazy. I feel like I'm the one who holds this truth. Like, you guys do not know what this person is like behind closed doors.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, it can
but
be
I feel like you
frustrating.
dealt with that on such like on a scale that's a lot bigger than what most of us can ever experience. What was that like?
It was frustrating, especially, I mean, to this day when it's like people saying things. Um, it's, if you've never met someone or you don't know them, how do you really know what they're like? And it just baffles me that you actually do believe, you know, these things that or you think that they wouldn't do something when you really don't know. So, I mean, it used to be a lot more frustrating. Now I kind of don't care. But yeah, it can be tough and it can be mentally draining too.
Also, when there are people in the middle, like a mutual friend who clearly is taking sides, like I guess Jerry is the example in the story, but people in real life who may be mutual friends, but then when like things really happen, they take sides, and it almost feels like your entire social circle is collapsing because you're like, it's like getting custody, like who's gonna get which friend, like whose side is gonna be, like whose side are you gonna be on?
Oh
Um,
yeah, that's
like
definitely annoying.
with a celebrity, would it that like with so much fame and so much publicity involved, what was that like?
I feel like a lot of, well, my best friends obviously are, I mean, I'm still friends with them and they would always take my
Right.
side. But I mean, there's people that were mutually friends with both of us and I mean, that's what I also learned is like you really can't trust anyone, especially also friends, that they'll drop you in an instant for the more famous person. And I mean, I get if it helps like their business or whatever. I mean, do what you want. But yeah, that was definitely something I experienced, especially some of these people that knew what went on behind closed doors. They chose that side and that's fine because I'd rather not be friends with someone who's not gonna, stick behind me.
Mhm.
But I mean, a lot of the times it was hypocritical because some of these people were, for example, one of like a mutual friend of ours was the editor of a big women's magazine and someone that is always like talking about women using their voice online. And I mean, I've seen in interviews him, talk about topics like that. But it's like you're gonna go take someone's side, which is fine, that's your friend. But um when my book came out, they sent my mom a message being like saying that this was gonna be controversial. But I was like, I didn't know a woman using her voice was such a controversial topic. So I feel like that part can get a bit um not sad, but you're kind of like, really? But I mean, that's life and that's how people are and you just have to move on with your life. But yeah, definitely that part of like who's going to take whose side is it can be a bit draining, but ultimately for me it's like I wouldn't even want you on my side if you're, or I'm not going to want to even be friends with you if you're going to play like that. So, yeah.
Does it feel like that hypocrisy is just for like it's the hustle, like it's part of the business?
I feel like sometimes I understand why people have to take a certain side for whether it's like they work together or, a lot of that business is are they really your friends or are they using you? So at the end of the day, with people like that, it's like go do what you're gonna do because it's like you can take someone's side, but you're gonna end up backstabbing them in the back anyways
Mm.
at some point. So I feel like in that business that's kind of common. And I feel like any man with money or fame, they're always gonna take their side, and that's fine. But that's just the reality of life.
Mm. Are you still modeling right now, or are you just in school full time?
No, I'm just in school. I
Oh,
stopped years ago. Yeah.
got it. Okay. Was it because of like this drama, this learning, or
No, I mean, I kind of stopped around COVID time. Um, uh, I just I started school online and it just wasn't something that I wanted to do or it wasn't for me a sustainable. I didn't think it was going to be a sustainable career or job for me. It was fun while I was young. Obviously, I met so many great people. I got to see amazing things, and so I'm really grateful for those experiences, but ultimately like I wanted to go to school and stop eventually.
hmm, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're super talented, so
Oh, thank
I'm
you.
not worried about you. I'm not worried about you. You've always got something going on. One question from the chat. I see it's for me. Why did you write anonymously? What have you learned after writing under your name? Has your writing theme style, etc. changed? So when I started writing online, I was still working in corporate, and it was like I was in consulting, so it was like a business. It was like a client facing role, and I think reputation was quite important. And like the purpose of writing is to say the things that I feel like I can't say when I'm around people. Like I will say something controversial, for example. So I definitely didn't want my name to be associated with that. But then over time, I realized that like this sounds kind of shallow, but like you only live once. Like I actually had this like YOLO moment where I was like, why not just die on this hill? Like, why not just like, this is what I stand for? Like, I'm gonna have to take an opinion either way if people are gonna keep pushing me to write about this thing. Eventually, I'm gonna have to say what I believe in. So, I just decided to take that stance. And there were also so many people around me at the time that were kind of in that niche of like writing opinions, writing about politics, writing about business and technology. And they were not anonymous. And I felt like if they could do it, then why not? Because I think that when people see you as a real person and not just your publication, they take you more seriously and it humanizes what you write because they understand that, oh, you're a person, you've had these experiences. This is where your opinions come from. This is where your beliefs come from. I think your writing is more it's easier to understand and relate to. Um, I don't think my writing style or theme has changed at all. If anything, I've just gotten more personal because I can now talk about like my real life and just like girl in her 20s realizing things kind of niche. Yeah. And I feel like so many people dropped from this call. So at this point, if you have any questions, just go unmute yourself and or raise your hand or something like that. See if there's anything in the chat. Maya, do you think love is a feeling or a choice? And in that vein, are relationships meant to serve us or a way for us to share our love and parts of ourselves?
I feel like it's definitely a feeling because I think sometimes when two people fall in love, especially if like I've seen people that fall in love but they can't be together, it's like you obviously like don't,
Hmm.
that's just a feeling you have, and I don't think it's a choice. I think you can also grow to love people. Um, but I don't think that's a choice either. So I definitely do think it's a feeling that you have for, so, and it doesn't always have to be romantic. Like I feel like I love my friends a lot, but that's different than loving like someone romantically. So yeah.
I think I had to learn that like I had to just like go through the lesson in order to learn that. But if you were to ask me that 2 years ago, I would not understand what you're saying. But I totally agree. I think that like in a way, romanticism, as nice as it is, and as nice as it sounds, it kind of ironically, I think romanticism ruins love in a way because you're so caught up with this idea of like this person is the ideal, like I will do anything for them. I'm going to marry them. This is the one that you, as we were saying earlier, you lose yourself. You lose all these other things that
Hmm.
are really important. Yeah, that's a interesting. I'm going to stick a pin in that and write about it later.
Yeah, you should.
um Ravi Joseph.
Hi, Maya and Sherry. Thanks for the discussion so far.
Hey.
I had a question about the creative process with autofiction. Um, did you find that the character's growth process kind of mirrored your own real life growth like the character learned were kind of the same lessons that you learned in real life, or did the character kind of take on a life of their own and learn their own, um, go through their own growth process in the novel?
Um, is this a question for me?
Yeah, for you,
Oh,
Maya.
okay.
Yeah.
I feel like Mallory's growth process in the novel was very similar to mine in real life. It was very like parallel. Um, so I mean, I really tried to put the emotion and like what Mallory was thinking at the time into the book, and you kind of do see because the novel's supposed to be set over a relationship, and that was obviously a few years. So I feel like from the beginning to end, you kind of see her growth as not only in the relationship but as a woman and how she matures. But I feel like also that what like that was happening to me in real life as well, kind of in the same way that Mallory was going through it.
Cool. Thank you.
But that's such a good question because it's interesting to think that like Mallory is her own being in this, even though it's a fictional universe, doesn't mean it's fake. Like it's fictional, but it's still real in
Yeah.
that universe.
Yeah, for sure.
See if there's anything else. Oh, and one of the earlier questions from Eloy Fisher, he said, were you with him during the fame transition?
Fame transition as in like for me or
Uh, I don't know, but I will speak for him since he's not here.
okay,
I think what he's asking is when your Oliver was getting famous, were you with him during that uphill climb?
um no. No, that was already like set. Or his career was set in stone
Yeah, like he
already.
was
So
already a big
yeah,
pop
he
star.
wasn't like working to rise more.
Yeah. By the way, I really like how cheeky the naming is in the story. Like for example, your initials and Mallory Hunt are the same. The band that Oliver Smith is in is, it's ooh, looks like something
Well,
we
there
all
was a different name for Oliver Smith, and it was going to be Ian Hurt, Hurte, which if anyone like gets that,
Oh,
it's
wait.
kind of you have to like think about it a little bit, but we switched it at the last minute
Mm,
to a more
that's
simple name.
is your puppy actually Oscar?
No, well, so I have two dogs. So that was also like something that was kind of combined in the book was I had two dogs in London that I got. So one's name's Winston and the other one's name is Chapo.
Which one is which?
Winston he's like a greyhound mix, like a whippet mix. And
Mm,
then my dog Chapo, he's a French bulldog.
that's adorable.
Yeah. They're cute.
Um, I'm so sorry if I say your name wrong, but Matraz?
Yeah, hello. Yeah, so I have a question about fame. I'm just sort of curious. So, what are some of the most kind of outlier ways of people relating to somebody's fame that you've ever kind of noticed or ran into, and how common are they?
Um, so are you asking like how can a normal person relate to
Yeah,
a
so,
famous
so, so, so
person?
so my impression is that there is like a spectrum of different ways. So, the way I sort of think about somebody becoming famous is just like a bunch of different people get told about them, through the media or through like these mediated ways. And sort of people relate, in many, many different ways. Like some become fans, some become stalkers, some kind of don't care. I'm sort of curious, like in that sort of spectrum of different responses, what are some of the more kind of unusual ones and like how often they appear? If that
Oh, I
makes
feel like the more unusual, like on that spectrum would definitely be, I mean, I get someone being a fan, but then they take it to like being where they will stalk people and they will, like I've had some of the like fans of my ex, like they'll like find your apartment or they'll like send you letters. And so like that, I mean, obviously is like, how did you find my address? Because it's nowhere online. So I feel like that aspect is definitely really strange. But yeah, I feel like that's like the most unusual thing with on that spectrum.
All right, thanks.
Matjaz, I think I recognize you from Twitter. I think it's the same profile picture.
That'll be correct, yes.
Right, yeah, I think we're in like the same part of Twitter. Like, you know how on Twitter we talk a lot about doxing?
Yes.
Yeah, like people figuring out like where you live and like where you hang out. That has always scared me. And like to your Charmaine, to your earlier question about like why I wrote anonymously, I didn't want to be doxxed. Like I didn't want people to know where I live, where I work, all that stuff. It's something I was paranoid about it. Yeah. And Maya, just out of like personal curiosity, what was the craziest, good or bad, craziest thing that your ex's fans have said or done to you?
Oh, there was this one person, and I actually thought it was funny, but my uncle, when I sent him the screenshot, got really upset. But this one girl was like, I'm gonna find out where you live. She was saying like, I'm gonna cut your body up and basically like blend your body parts and drink your blood, like all this crazy stuff. Really, I shouldn't
Girl.
be laughing because it's not funny, but I was sending it to him because like, haha, like she's obviously not right in the head because he's
Yeah.
gonna say that.
She's
And
creative.
she's like, I'm gonna come to London and find where you live. But I would get a lot of messages like around, that very violent, like weird, um, writing. And then there was also some that would be like, I'm gonna kill your dog and stuff like that. So it's not
Oh my
funny, but
goodness.
yeah, it's just like really weird messages.
How do you like, why do you think some people are so like crazy fanatical? I guess that's where the word fan actually comes from, but like why do some people get so religiously like fanatical about a celebrity?
I never really understood the psychology behind it. I wonder if there's studies on this because I understand people being fans or even super fans and stuff and like wanting to see people or even like going outside their hotel to see them like that. I feel like that's normal and stuff, but um I feel like stuff like that where you're sending people messages, especially if you don't know them, you don't know any of the people. It's like I don't get the obsession of you're so obsessed with someone that you're gonna like send their girlfriend or like their significant other messages. Because I see this with other famous people as well. It's like their partners or significant others get a lot of weird messages and threats and stuff. And I just kind of never really understood it. Because if you love that person so much, you're such a fan of them, why don't you respect their private life? I don't
It's more
know.
like possessive. Like I want it.
Yeah, very possessive.
That's so weird. Well, that's really all the things I wanted to cover. Um, any more questions from the small fireside chat that we have right now? I mean, if not, I'm gonna call it a night. Um, thank you so much. Once again, thank you so much, Maya, for taking the time to talk about your book. This was really
Oh, thank you
exciting,
for
and
having me.
I loved your book. I'm gonna get
Thank
it on
you.
Amazon. I only have like the PDF version that Mitchell sent me, but I want a copy to keep.
Oh my God, I'll send you one actually. I
Can you
thought you had
sign it?
a physical one. What was that?
Can you sign it?
Oh, if you want me to,
Please,
I
yeah,
will.
I'll give you my
I'll send
address.
you
Yeah.
one. Because it
Yeah.
looks better, I feel like, in the book, in print, with all the
Okay,
graphics and
yeah. I
stuff.
need you to
Yeah.
sign it. Send me one and sign it. Okay.
Okay, I will.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I hope this discussion was enlightening and entertaining at the same time. And yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye guys.